know you're going to make mistakes. It's freaking part of it. It doesn't matter. Know that every housing situation is not going to be like exactly how the Airbnb pictures look. It doesn't matter. Like, it's all about the journey.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Dylan Callier. I'm a physical therapist, and welcome to the New Medical Nomads podcast, where I get to document my journey as a medical traveler, as well as interview other experts within the traveling field. Now, the rules for the traveling game are constantly changing, so anything you hear on this show should be for entertainment purposes only. This is not legal, financial, or medical advice. Enjoy the show and safe travels. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the New Medical Nomads podcast. My name is Dylan Callier, and today I'm here with Laura Latimer. Did I pronounce your last name right?
Almost.
Oh.
Yeah, it's Laura Latimer.
Latimer, okay.
But a lot of people say Latimer, so you did really good, I'd say.
So I'm here with Laura Latimer, also known as Laura Nomadicare. Do you have to put that down as an alias on your... like when you're applying for a new state or anything like that?
Ooh, maybe I'll have to start doing that. Yeah. Some people legit think that's my last name. And I'm like, no, it's actually just my business. But
yeah, you're like a mob boss or something.
Yeah, right? Ooh, 2 names.
Yeah, Laura, Nomadicare, Babyface Laura.
yeah, totally.
So, Laura, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of how you got into the travel career? I know you've been doing it for a while now, but yeah, just where you're coming from, how long you've been doing it, and what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, I have been traveling. This is going on to my 8th year of traveling. So, I am a travel occupational therapist, and I'm one of those therapists that decided to travel straight away as a new grad. And I did. I started traveling as a new grad, and I never looked back. I never knew how much I would love this industry. My original goal was actually just trying to get to Australia. That was like my big goal in grad school. And I had a map my best friend bought me that hung over my bed all through grad school, because I went to school in like a small town in Texas. I was so ready to see more. I felt pulled to see more. But I had, you have to get through grad school to do the next step.
Right.
So every day I would look at that map and say, I'm going to move to Australia whenever I'm done with this. And then it comes to be right before graduation, and I'm at the AOTA conference. And there's a booth in the back that is a booth for Australia. And I like dress up for them and everything. And I'm so excited. And I go to this back booth, and they have Australian candy and they have Australian accents. And I'm so infatuated. And they end up telling me that I cannot, in fact, go to Australia as a new grad. It takes like 8 months for paperwork to go through and all this stuff that I did not know. So I'm crushed and walking back down the booths, like so disappointed. And then sure enough, there was a booth on travel therapy. So I had never heard of it until that moment, that fateful moment. And I just, everything was like pinch me at that point. They'd be like, we'll pay for your travel. It's just 13-week contracts at a time. You could do 3 of them and then get yourself to Australia. And I was just like, what's the catch? What's the catch? And of course they told me no catch. So I signed up, and and it's been such a cool journey. So since then I did end up living and working in Australia for a few years.
Very cool.
And then I am a traveler for adventure and for location. So I've traveled to so many locations around the United States. I always take at least an assignment off a year to go backpack around the world.
Oh, that's cool.
And then a few years ago, I started Nomadicare. So that is my passion project in my company. And the problem I'm trying to solve in the industry is the way we find our recruiters. And what I found at that point is that it was really hard to find out if a recruiter was being honest with us and telling us the truth. And it took a long time till we as travelers got to a point to be able to identify the red flags and understand our pay, because it's a lot to learn. Mm-hmm. And so I then started interviewing recruiters across the country and finding the ones that are breaking down pay fairly, are being honest, are that kind of friendly voice that we want on our team. And then the travelers can come through Nomadicare, get matched with them. And then I hold them, the companies and the recruiters, accountable for these things that they say. So that's been kind of my thing. And then lots of people like watch my videos on Facebook, and I try to teach the travelers too.
Yeah, very cool. And I was telling you before we started recording that you're actually where I get most of my information. So most of what I've learned about the nitty gritty of all the different things between interviews, between contract negotiations and pay, mostly through you. So thank you for all the information you're putting out there.
You are
kind of
welcome.
feel like I'm talking to a celebrity right now.
Oh, it's so cool.
So you were in Thailand not too long ago, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. That is true, yeah.
You're like living my dream right now.
Yeah, I did. I just did, I'm actually 6 months off of traveling and did 6 months around the world. It was such a good time. Amazing. Yeah.
See, when I was telling people, so I'm not traveling yet, but it's been a plan for about 3 years now. And I would tell people that I wanted a job that allowed me to take a break and like do these like mini retirements to where you're not waiting until you're retired to do all this traveling, but these mini retirements where you kind of sprinkle it in throughout the year. I think
yes.
I might have heard that in Vagabonding by Rolf Potts. That was like one of those books that I read that like changed my perspective on everything. But before seeing you, I didn't know anybody else doing that. So I'd tell somebody that and they'd almost kind of look at me like I was crazy. Like, what are you talking about? Type thing. Like now seeing that there are people out there doing it, it's so much more achievable. And so very motivating.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think one tip I can give people who look at me and they think, how do you do that? How do you take that time off? What's nice, us as travelers, we make more than permanent employees do for various reasons. But what I would do while I was traveling is I had my banking system, since so much of our world today is allowed to be automated, automatically take out a certain percentage of my pay. So I had this travel fund that I would never even see it. It never felt like it was even gone because it would be like auto out. And so I always had money at the end of the year to travel, like more than enough. I always had leftover because I did that. But because I did it automatically and didn't see it, it was almost like a travel tax I put on myself. And it's worked out so well every year. Yeah. So don't be intimidated by like, oh, I have to save. How much should I save? Just make it automated. And you'll always have money to go explore. Awesome.
Yeah. That's very good. So we'll be able to talk about your business here in a little bit as well. And feel free to, I fully believe in what your message is and what you're trying to do. So feel free to promote anything you have going on.
Cool.
What are some books or some people that you follow that have kind of helped you along your travel path or even on the business side of things? Because I know you're a very business savvy lady.
Yeah, I think so. My personality, I think, has always been entrepreneurial.
Okay. And
I never knew that ever, like growing up. But once I started traveling, and maybe people listening can relate to this, these travelers, I would go into assignments and it would be so quick for me to like see the gaps and see the systems that they can make it better. And it was so obvious to me. And I'd be like, why aren't we just doing it this way? Let's put this up. This is how we can do our documentation easier. And so I get really lit up by that kind of like making things more efficient, making them systems, making them simpler. But as travelers, people do not want us to do that. We are supposed to go use their systems and smile. So, so I learned not to bite my tongue, but then I'd make my own system. So forever, even when I was traveling, I would make my own reference books and find a way to like release that creative part of myself while I was traveling. And so what I would then naturally be drawn to are these books that were more about like creating and living these lives of your dreams. So one of my favorite podcasts that I started listening to years ago that actually was the first inspiration to start my own business is this podcast called School of Greatness.
Okay.
And it's this guy named Lewis Howes, and he pretty much walks you through like the steps of having a passion, being a creator at heart, and like what does it actually take to do that. And what I found through my life is it's the people you surround yourself with that ultimately you become. And it's just like study after study shows you make the average money of the people you hang out with. You're the average weight. You're the average humor. Like it's such a big piece of human conditioning. And so I started getting in these circles of other people that were like big dreamers, putting action to it, recommending books. And so all of my books the last few years have been all about like living the life of your dream. How do you make it happen? How do you create systems? What, like all these things. But I love it. Like I'm such a nonfiction growth oriented person.
Yeah.
But then I would say my favorite book, though, for any traveler, just a book. And this is not self-growth. This is just like my absolute favorite book is The Alchemist. If
Yes.
you've never read that book, like everyone read it. It only takes a few days, and every time I read it, it like teaches me something new about myself.
Oh, I have it here somewhere. I know. Yeah.
I love that book.
It came at such a good time because I'm not a fiction reader like you. That was the first fiction book that I read in like 2 years. Yes. And it came at such a good time because I was kind of leaving from home and going on my last clinical, and some things had happened, and I'm starting to kind of second guess myself if this whole travel thing is something I want to do. And then I read that book, and it was like perfect timing and just related.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. It always fires me up.
Yeah. It's by Paulo Coelho, I think is how he pronounces his name. And a little history on the book. He's Brazilian. It released in Brazil. And I guess is the native language Portuguese there. And he released it and nobody bought it. Nobody wanted it. And so then after about a year or two or something like that, he came out with the English version and it just took off.
Nice.
Yeah,
oh, good for him. It's such a good book. Yeah. Yeah. So that would be my top recommendation for anybody. I don't care what stage of life you're at. Read that book. It's so good.
Awesome. You were talking about getting into social circles that kind of push you or that you relate with more. Can you kind of talk about the travel conference that's coming up? Because I feel like that's a very, you're getting a lot of people with a lot of the same aspirations of this location and a lot of relationships developed there. Can you kind of talk about that?
That is absolutely right. So the Travelers Conference that you're talking about, there's a conference every year in September, and it's in Vegas. And every year it's grown and grown and grown. So the first year I went was 4 years ago, and I don't even remember how I learned about it or why I ended up going, but I went by myself, as I do. I'm mostly a solo traveler, and I show up, and that year, it's hundreds and hundreds. Like this year it's over 1,000, but that year maybe it was 600 or 700. And it was all traveling healthcare professionals. And so everyone there was like eager to meet each other and happy. Like it's someone that like gets your lifestyle. They get the whole like contract working, moving, solo traveling, self-growth. And it was such cool energy. And so I went and was just lit up by all these other travelers. And then on the other side of it, you get like continued education credits when you go for these talks. And that was, I think, also one of the first times I realized how little I knew. And I was already traveling like 3 years at this point. And I go into Joseph Smith's tax home talk, and I was like, what the heck? and then I go into like all these different talks about how the pay is broken down, how we're supposed to negotiate contracts. And I just like took notes like a crazy person. And I was like, how is this like, how do I not know this stuff? And I've already been in this industry as long as I have. And wait, why have my recruiters not told me this? And wait a second, I never negotiated for this. And so it was this moment for me of like, wow, like there's so much to this. And me being the personality I am, like took that as like, that's a gap that like we need simpler education out there. So we have the CEUs. And then we have these great speakers, and you actually learn the industry like way better. But then you're right. It turns out travel healthcare is such a small group of people. And so once you get into this like networking in these circles and go out with these people in Vegas, they become real friends. So now all of a sudden these pictures you see on Facebook and the forums are like your real buddies and your real friends, and you care about each other. And so then people kind of have your back more. When you post on there, people will be like, oh yeah, I met her in Vegas. Let me make sure she knows how to do this and do this. So it is really important to go to these events in person, because you will be shocked at how often you'll run into them again, because our world, as big as it is, it's so small at the same time.
Yeah. That's awesome. So going into, you talked about Joseph Smith and his company Travel Tax, which gotten to reach out a little bit and already had some questions from them. So they're a great company as well.
Yeah, agreed.
Would you want to go into pay negotiations and kind of the breakdown there? I know you just recently maybe opened up a document that helps people in my position kind of get ready for that negotiation. But could you talk about that and into a little bit of the details there?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I can say about Nomadicare. So when you go through Nomadicare, the company, the main thing is to get matched with an honest recruiter. But then the second thing that I learned while I was interviewing recruiters from all kinds of companies, it's not even limited to like the new ones or the big ones or anything. Recruiters, when they go into a company, they get trained for the first part of their whole career, like up to the first year on just recruiting stuff.
Yeah.
Like in their world, it's sales and it's profit margins and it's, all of these different things. They're not thinking like we are. So while we're over here thinking about like our tax homes and where are we going to live and, the ethics of this company and like all of these things, they're over here like on their end getting pushed for different things. So as I started interviewing and I would ask these recruiters across the board all of these questions about how do you break down pay? Well, how do you do extension pay? Teach me about tax homes. Let me make sure you understand it. I saw overwhelmingly most recruiters don't really know this that well. So it really does then come to us to know what to ask for to almost lift the industry up from the bottom up, right? What we ask for is then with the recruiters will be like, oh, I need to learn this. So when you go through and get the match with Nomadicare, now you also get this 4-point online course for free. So you'll get the breakdown because we can't always count on the recruiters to know this that well. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to say that they're doing it intentionally. I just realize their education is not that good in these areas. So a lot of time it's not malicious. Okay. So that being said, it is really important for us to know how to ask for our pay to be broken down because recruiters are going to do whatever they're taught to do and whatever is easiest. But that doesn't always mean that's the most empowered way for us to know about our pay. And so the first thing is to know how we get paid in general, right? Mm-hmm. And so with that, when a hospital, wherever we're going to go work, whenever they pay the recruitment company to find us, they're paying them this big lump sum. You'll hear it called the bill rate. And so from the bill rate, the recruitment company is going to take their money out of that first. They're going to take their profit margins, what they need, and what's left is our pay rate. So the first most important thing to know about that is that everything they're giving us is from that one pot of money. Just different companies will move it around in different places based on their marketing tactics and what's easiest for their legal logistics. And so our pay then can be moved from a taxable part of our income to these reimbursements and tax-free stipends to getting paid travel money to get from point A to point B to our medical insurance to our license reimbursement. All of that is our pay, right? And so when a company just tells you, we're paying you this much, this is what you'll take home will be, at the end of a week, well, they're leaving out a lot of different categories. And so then you have no clue how to compare different things to each other. And so the first thing is just to understand that nothing's free. You're going to hear all these different quotes and all these different things thrown at you. Just know it's all part of your pay. And then when you get that pay breakdown guide, which anyone can get from me for free, you'll see all the categories our pay can go into. And so your next step then is to write them all down. Make sure the recruiter told you all of them and didn't leave any of them out. And then you want to divide it up and make it into an hourly pay rate. All right. Is this making sense so far?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Okay. The reason you want to do that is that way if you have company A who's giving you all kinds of variables in different formats, this one's one-time pay, this one is by week, this one's by day, this one's by hour, you have one single thing that can see the whole pay package by hour. And then company B, which will do it completely differently again. Now you can actually compare pays with each other. And so it's important for that, for comparing pay. It's important so that when it comes to negotiating things like your extra time rate, how much you're going to get paid per hour after you're done with your contract. If your company needs you to stay later, work a Saturday, you know what you're negotiating. A lot of companies will make extra profit that way because they'll just say time and a half to you, and time and a half would only be off your taxable. So they're keeping a lot of profits. Yeah. So you would know what to ask for your extra time, and you would know what to ask for your extensions because you can clearly see then what did they pay for my license, what did they pay for my travel. That was part of my pay package that they're not paying the second time. So if they don't take that money and put it somewhere else, it's like they got a pay raise and I got a decrease in pay.
Right.
And so that's why it's so important to break that pay down, see where it is clearly, and then you actually have some leverage when you're negotiating. Whereas if someone just told me one lump number, I would have no idea what went where. I wouldn't know how to negotiate. I wouldn't really know what it meant. So does that make sense for kind of like a big overview, or is there any deeper questions to that one?
That was really good. You went into the contract extensions, and that's something I had heard about before, where you were kind of saying they're not paying for that, relocation fee or the new licensure or anything like that. And so I think a lot of travelers out there, from what I'd gathered, were not arguing or negotiating for a higher rate when they did do those extensions. So I think that was a really good point.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I don't think a lot of companies, some companies really do just give it to all their travelers,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of companies do not, and they're happy. They're happy for us not to say anything because
Mm-hmm.
on their end they make more money. But then if
Right.
we do, a lot of them will definitely, they want us to stay in an extension. That's the dream for them. It's so easy when we stay in extension. So definitely feel empowered to ask for more and practice that negotiating muscle. It's scary for people at first, I think, but then it gets easier and easier, and then you're like, oh yeah, it's just money. It's just asking questions. It's all right.
Yeah. I think you getting that experience, especially as a new grad, is very beneficial too, because coming out of school, if you go the traditional route, not the travel, you get that one shot with the contract coming out of school. But with the travel company,
Yeah.
you get multiple chances, and you start learning about, oh, I know I need to look at this. I know this is, within the range that I can ask for, and you get more confident with that. So I think that's
I
definitely
love
one of the
that.
skills you can gain.
You're so right about that. We get so many chances, so don't worry if you haven't done it in the past. We get to negotiate all the time. Lucky us.
One question I did have about maybe this doesn't fit into pay breakdown, but I know there's the taxable rate, so your hourly rate that you get from the hospital, and then how do you keep the rest of that non-taxable?
Yeah, so that is a very, very big question. So I have to always surround this by saying I'm not a tax expert.
Okay.
Like I have to say that. So everything I say is the best I know. However, in no way am I certified or studied, taxes professionally. So I'll give you great information. I learn it from the best. But of course, you can go to Travel Tax or somewhere to get like legit advice for your personal issue. Okay, so I have to say that.
No, that's fine.
Moving forward after that, so it's a big question, but it's actually not as complicated as people make it out.
Okay.
So let's say you're a traveler, you want to travel. Cool, you know that, you've got that inside of you. You have two options. Just think of it that way. Okay. One option, you can travel and you can go anywhere you want to, kind of gypsy. You don't need a tax home. You don't need to think about anything. And then you're going to be paid just like you'd be paid as a permanent employee. You will be fully taxed. You'll still get 13-week contracts. You still have flexibility, but you are not going to get tax-free money. Okay, so that's one option. Option number two is where the government thinks of us a little bit more like we're on a business trip. So if you were to have a company or you're working for a company and you go away on a business trip, one of the things that people love is that they can write that off, right? They're on a business trip. They can write off their hotels. They can write off their food, which means that part of their income when they put in those receipts is tax-free. So our industry is similar but different because they give us the money up front. And what we call it in our industry is per diems or reimbursements or stipends. They all mean the same thing. And so to do that, though, you have to prove that you are essentially going on a business trip. And what that means for us is that you do have a home base. And that home base you are spending money at, like a fair rent. So you can't get away with $50, $100. You need to pay a fair rent somewhere. And you're traveling away from it, and then you're paying money somewhere else too. So the government sees that as duplicating expenses, is what they call it. So that home, you pay your fair rent and go away from it. Number two, you have to go back home sometimes. So this is a rule that says you cannot abandon your home. So about 30 days a year, does not have to be consecutive. You have to actually go home. You don't necessarily have to work when you're at home, but you do need some kind of proof that you were there. And then also part of not abandoning it means think about how you would act on a business trip. You would not change your voter's card. You would not change your driver's license. You wouldn't change your mailing address. Everything would stay there because you're just going away from home to come back. Think of it the same way. You keep all your paper ties there. So you're doing this so in case you get audited, knock on wood you don't, but you can just show them this paperwork. Here's my lease. Here's where I was paying rent. It's just proof, right? Here's where all my ties are still this house. You're trying to prove that you're just going away for a temporary assignment, but you still had a home here. And that's why they're giving us all this extra money. It's not just because we are, adventurous people. So they're like, here's extra money. They're actually trying to reimburse us for duplicating expenses. And then the third thing that's just as important as the rest is how far away you go. So there's this myth in the industry that I think is getting stamped out more and more, but still many companies will talk about this concept of 50 miles away from home. And they'll say, once you go 50 miles away from home, you're okay. You're far enough away. So what's important for us to know is, even if them as a company, even if that is their rule that they go by, it doesn't mean it's our rule. We have to go by the IRS's rule, because if we get audited, they don't care. If we're like, the company said, they're like, don't care. So they say, is more of a gray area. They say you have to actually go far enough away that you literally cannot commute. It's just not commutable. So you literally have to have a need to have two houses. And so while it's a gray area, you also can kind of tell, like, plenty of people will commute an hour. So it needs to be further than that, and then, and that's pretty much it. And then you can't stay anywhere over a year. As soon as you make all of your money from one place in 1 year, bing, that's your tax home. You made all your money there. So those are kind of like the big things to think about first. And then there's all these specific things that people can always come back and ask questions around. And that's when it's great to go to a real professional tax advisor as well. But that's a good starting place.
Yeah.
And
I'm actually, so my situation right now, I'm actually commuting about an hour one way to work. I had heard of that 50-mile rule and kind of heard you kind of stamp it out along with Andrew Craig as well. He went in on that. And it's definitely, I don't know, I guess it's more natural or normal for Southern Missouri. A lot of heavy laborers, there'll be mulch guys or lumber. They'll drive up to St. Louis and try and sell wood and things like that. And that's just their living. But definitely, probably 100 miles, not 50. So almost double that.
Totally. That's how it kind of was in Texas too. We had these wide open highways with no traffic, that the speed limit would be 70, 75. People would go over 50 miles, no problem in Texas. But then when I'm living up in New England, oh my gosh, we can barely get 6 miles in an hour. It's like the worst. So it's so different, which is it's the reason the IRS doesn't give us the mileage. Of course they can't.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, where are you from originally?
Texas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Small town, big town?
So I grew up in a town called Flower Mound, which is actually named after a mound of flowers.
Okay.
And which has grown a lot. But yeah, that's where I went to high school, and then grad school and undergrad was Texas Tech. So that's Go Raiders, Lubbock, Texas, a place where tumbleweeds and cows are massively in abundance.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quite different. I grew up on the Mississippi River, so a lot of playing Tom Sawyer growing up. And
nice. Yeah. That's so cool.
So you were talking about the myth of the 50-mile rule. Are there any myths out there that you come across a lot that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah. I think the biggest myth, and I don't know if myth is quite the right word for this, but I think the biggest thing I see that I would like to kind of just talk about is just, it's just everything. It's just when you go online, which is where we find amazing information. Like, thank goodness for the forums that were not there when I was there. But the counter side to that is kind of the culture we live in is so fear-based, and so now I feel like the myth is that you have to know so much before you get started. And people get so scared because they'll go on these forums and they'll see, well, this person's contract got cut and this happened to this person. And what if this? And oh my gosh, what if my housing this happens? And there's so many stories in their head now that people are not just like taking that leap. And so I think the myth is that people think people are trying to get over prepared. And part of the journey is walking into the unknown. That is the point of this. It's not like we don't become travel nurses or therapists or any other travel healthcare professional in order to have this like perfectly laid out safe route. We take a permanent job if we want everything laid out for us. Part of this is that thrill of like, oh my God, what am I getting myself into? And so I think the myth is that you can't do it. And what I truly believe is that if you are someone who feels that pull inside of yourself of like, maybe I want to travel. Maybe I want to see more than this. Maybe I could do this. And then you go on the forums and get too scared and think, no, but that might happen, but that might happen. Just wipe that away. When I started traveling, I knew like nothing. And I don't think that's the balance, right? I don't mean know nothing, go do it. But I was fine, right? Like I jumped in and I had bad assignments. I had good assignments. Every single assignment, I grew so much. And I learned things about myself I never knew. I learned how to do a treatment I never knew. I was in over my head sometimes. I was like the rock star sometimes. It didn't matter. Like, that's the point of traveling. So I think what I just want to say with this is, like, know some basic things. Yes, like the tax home thing is important for if you get audited. You do want to have a grasp on that. But easy. Call travel tax, tell them your situation, they'll confirm it. And listen to like a simple webinar and get your checklist. And like pay, cool. Get my pay breakdown and do the best you can. Mm-hmm. Know you're going to make mistakes. It's friggin' part of it. It doesn't matter. Know that every housing situation is not going to be like exactly how the Airbnb pictures look. It doesn't matter. Like, it's all about the journey more than the destination for this kind of lifestyle. So don't overthink it. Don't always think you're getting screwed over. Don't always think that there's something better out there. Like, you've got to enjoy the journey and not fall into the myth that everything's going to go wrong. Like, you got this. And if it does go wrong, you can handle it. You're strong. So I think that's what I'd want to speak on with that. Don't worry about all the fear.
Absolutely. And I can kind of attest to that. I gave a year to my friend now working, but right now it's kind of that middle zone where I got 6 months to go, and it's already been 6 months, and I'm in the same place and going to the same place to work, and it's starting to feel a little bit monotonous. And I knew I was going to hit this point and like want to go and just like start. But, I love this job and what I'm doing now. And I was very lucky to get started with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you kind of following that, if you were talking to someone who was on the fence of wanting to travel, but wasn't sure if it was for them, they just kind of found out about it, what would you tell them?
I would tell them, if you want to travel, do it. And just literally, it's just do it. Mm-hmm. Put one foot in front of the other. It can feel overwhelming at the beginning. But if you feel that inside of yourself, there's something that you've got to do. Like, it's one of those things that you think big picture, and 40 years from now, what are you going to look back on and wish you had done? Are you going to look back and wish you had kept the safe job and kept going to what you know and coming home to what you know? Or are you going to look back and be proud of yourself no matter what happens? Like, let's say worst case scenario and you go out and do it and you hate it. Like, if you feel that pull, though, it's almost like you have to try it. There's something still on the other side of that you need to figure out. You need to get out of your system, and there's some growth and learning there. And maybe what you learn is that, I'm so grateful for my home and my family. I'm so grateful. And maybe what you learn is that, wow, like, there's cultures out there I never even knew existed, or like, I can't believe I never tried this food before, or I can't believe I was brave enough to go to these places by myself and I just made new best friends, and I can't believe, like, all these things are, you'll find out. But if you don't do it, you don't get any of that. Nothing. And like, all experiences don't have to be the most great feeling experiences for them to be well worth doing. So I think if you feel that pull, so step one is do a little bit of research. There are certain professions out there right now in the market that it is really hard to get a travel job. So yeah, call the companies first. Make sure the market's there for you before you just like throw that 2-week paper down and say like, Laura told me to go do it. And then you're like, oh my God. So do that research to make sure it's like really for you. Check your why. Make sure your why is in alignment with that kind of lifestyle. It is a lifestyle journey. So if your why is literally only money, check yourself. It's not as cheap as you think. There's time off. There's days that you'll get sick that don't get paid. So check yourself if it's really just about money, because the lifestyle is very different. And I feel like only money travelers do struggle more. But if your intentions are feeling pulled from more of that adventure side, just do it. One foot in front of the other, get those paperwork in, start interviewing, and before you know it, you're going to be like in a new location and be like, oh my God, it's not that bad.
There was a line that you had messaged when we were setting this up, and it was like, taking the leap even though you're scared. And I thought that was so perfect.
That's right. Yeah. I think I say like, feel the fear, but do it anyway. Yeah.
That is so good. Hey guys, so I am so incredibly thankful for Laura to be able to spend as much time as she did with me during this interview. So much time that we actually had to break it up into 2 separate parts. So this is the end of part 1. If you are waiting for part 2, it will be launched next week, or you can go ahead and find the second part on the YouTube channel where I have all the episodes. And while you're there, if you could please just subscribe, comment, and like the videos. Show us some love. We would greatly appreciate you trying to get our message out there. That will greatly help us. And if you're on the other social media outlets, on Facebook, on iTunes, however you found us, that would greatly help us in trying to help other travelers out there, or soon-to-be travelers that are in the medical field. So thanks so much for tuning in. Stay tuned for the next episode. And as always, safe travels.